Hello everyone, it's Christine here, and this video is to share with you a piece of art that I have created and am entering in the Incognito Art Show. I'll include a link in the description below this video, and it is a piece where I have combined printed on fabric that's had like a transfer put on it that almost makes it like a canvas, pieces of scrap fabrics. I think they're actually from like saris, and they've got lovely stitching on them and lovely detailing, and then I've done a whole series of stitch doodling over the surface of the piece. So this piece is inspired by Monet's garden at Giverny in France. I've been lucky enough to visit there a number of times and see the amazing bridges and the ponds and the water lilies. And Monet himself, I think he did about 250 different paintings in his water lilies series. And so I wanted to bring the water lilies into the piece. What you're seeing on the screen here is on the back of it is where I used my design of the water lilies and stitched initially from the back to lay down foundation stitches, which I then wrapped with a thicker thread on the front, but I'll talk you through that a bit more later. So this is the painting that inspired me in this piece. Fortunately, all of Monet's paintings are copyright free. Well, certainly this series is. And so I was able to use that in the piece, almost in what they call in the art world a derivative style. So taking elements of it, but as you can see, weaving it, cutting it into strips and then weaving it with bits of fabric. So you can see that green fabric running through it. There's that a fabric that almost looks like a path up the top there, and then a fabric with lovely stitching through it at that lower area, bringing out the red. So I looked with the fabrics and with indeed the thread colours, which you can see me sharing on the screen there. And I am creating this voiceover after having filmed the video because I was needing to be quiet on the evening that I filmed it. So I filmed it first without sound and thought I'll come back and show you how I have stitched it or talk you through it. And so what you're seeing there is the pieces that I cut off the collage when I cut the strips and wove them together into a fabric type collage with, so you can see the sort of consistency of it, almost like a canvas. It's where you can take an image and then reverse it and then print it onto fabric, which I did, or not print it on actually. So you print the transfer and then you use the iron and transfer that onto the fabric. That's how I did that one. It's one I've had sitting off to the side. I'd played with it at one stage thinking I might stitch some water lilies, like smaller water lilies into it. And so there you can see on the screen I've got the fabric, and then that's another skerrick of the fabric, and I loved that one with the little yellow bits because they reminded me of water lilies as well. And then that's the further bit of fabric that I've got running through that top section, and you can see this with the stitching, it's almost kind of just gone into the work. And I love how the process of this stitching through from the back and then wrapping with threads gives you such a cohesive surface to your piece. So I'm showing you there just some of the threads I used. I used something probably the consistency of an Appleton wool, but I think it's a more cotton based thread. I got some massive bundles from the Embroiderers Guild D-Stash market a while ago, so they were actually all the threads I used on this, so all reclaimed threads. And what I'm showing you now on the video is how, once I've laid down some base outline threads, I then proceed to do multi layers of wrapping with threads on the surface. So at this point I'm only just popping through from the back and then doing wrapping stitches around the threads that I've already laid. So what I essentially did initially was just with a thin thread stitch through from the back in the shape of, with a running stitch in the shape of the design, essentially the water lilies, which I had on the back of the piece. So I put those little very thin cotton almost blending in with the background stitches in first, and then once I had those stitches in place, I then did essentially a whipping stitch through each of those running stitches with this thicker sort of cotton / wool type stuff, and that then gave it a wrapped consistency. And then I continued building layers in that same way, and you can probably see it here, and I did this a bit intentionally. On this particular water lily, there's a lighter front section and then a darker back section, so I used a darker thread for the back, but now I'm just coming in with the lighter thread and whipping that essentially, again just to add some further dimension to it, but also to tone it in with the front piece but still have it looking darker. So you'll be watching that for a bit, and I will, if you're interested, share a further video, because I'd like to do some more of this sort of doodling onto canvases that combine both. And I think I'd like to continue with this experimentation with works of art that aren't in copyright. Obviously I don't want to use something that is copyright. I understand there are protections for collage anyway, in terms of it being derivative work and not actually breach and being a form of fair use, but I find it safer to use things that are out of copyright, because then you just don't have any of those worries about it. And I just love how you can see those little colours from the original painting in the background, and you can see how they mix with what are clearly then the fabric pieces, and then bringing in the elements like the water lilies to the surface of the piece just adds and kind of binds it all together, I think. I did just look up some little references to, because I was interested in sort of what was the history of collage as I was thinking through this piece. And I've also been reflecting a lot on the whole concept of what is art. I think it's sort of going to be a bit of a theme that's going to flow through my stitching and my creative pieces this year, that question of what is art and how it relates to what we do in the textile and fibre creation process. And I really love in this piece that I've been able to take what was a painted form, and then I've been able to combine it into a textile medium, and I've been able to reflect with both textiles and then the fibres that I'm stitching with and the imagery back to the original painting. So for me that's exciting, and that is something that I definitely want to explore more. So in terms of collage, and this is the benefit of having filmed the video ahead and talking now, I could be stitching away on the screen and actually also looking at some things and sharing them with you as well. So collage comes from the French word which is coller, to glue or stick together, and it's primarily used in the visual arts but in music too. And so it may refer to the technique as a whole, or more specifically to a two-dimensional work assembled from flat pieces on a flat substrate, whereas assemblage typically refers to a three-dimensional equivalent. So this is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because we're creating a flat surface, but then we're adding some dimensional elements to it. And so collage may sometimes include magazine and newspaper clippings, ribbons, paints, bits of coloured or handmade papers, portions of other artworks or texts, photographs and other found objects glued to a piece of paper or canvas. The origins of collage can be traced back hundreds of years, but this technique made a dramatic reappearance in the early 20th century as an art form of a novelty. And so it was Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso in the beginning of the 20th century when collage became a distinctive part of modern art. But interestingly, it goes back as far as 200 BC with the invention of paper in China. But then it sort of arose again in the 10th century in Japan when calligraphers began to apply glued paper using texts on surfaces when writing their poems. And you can still see some surviving pieces from this era. And then it appeared again in medieval Europe during the 13th century. Gold leaf panels started to be applied in Gothic cathedrals around the 15th and 16th century. And gemstones and other precious metals were applied to religious images, icons, and also to coats of arms. So it's kind of interesting to just think how diverse this form of collage is. Until I kind of read that, I wasn't thinking of, when you look at that religious iconography, I wasn't thinking of that as a form of collage. So 18th century collage art by the likes of Mary Delaney, and in the 19th century collage methods were used among hobbyists for memorabilia, for example photo albums and books. So both Hans Christian Andersen and Karl Spitzweg. And many institutions have attributed the beginnings of the practice of collage to Picasso and Braque in 1912. However, early Victorian photo collage suggests collage techniques were practiced in the early 1860s. Excuse me. Sitting outside, and I think I just got some dust blowing onto my tonsils. So as you can see in the piece that I'm stitching, as I sort of get to the end of a row of the wrapping, I then take it to the back to anchor the thread down and then just pop back through. I was a bit worried that maybe the where I had done the image transfer and the portions of that were woven into it would be hard to stitch through, but they were actually fine. But that's where I originally came up with the idea of using a nice sharp pointy needle to apply the initial stitching outline, and then building it up with thread. But it was a very evolving piece. When I first started with my initial stitches, I thought, oh, maybe that will be enough just to suggest the water lilies. But then I wanted the water lilies really to be, floating on the surface of the piece and have a fair degree of sort of being quite visible when you're looking at the piece from afar. And I just love how they bring the layers together and just unify it. And originally I was thinking I might just do a very sort of more outline form. Well, I mean, these are outlines, but a more perfect looking water lily in the very centre of the piece. But I'm really happy I went with these more randomly positioned and shaped and different positioned water lilies. And so, the collage form has actually passed through various, schools and stages in art and also in painting as well. I won't go into all of that. And then collaging with wood as well. If you have a look at Wiki, there's lots of great things. Decoupage is a type of collage usually defined as craft. So again, this is an interesting question of what's the difference between art and craft, and when is something art. And then, photo montage is another form, digital collage, three-dimensional collage. And then there's a whole list of artists who have used collage. So I'm comfortable that in creating this woven collage style piece, that I'm definitely following in the histories of other artists. And so I was, as I mentioned earlier, interested in kind of understanding the legal issues. So when collage uses existing works, the result is what some copyright scholars call a derivative work. The collage thus has copyright separate from any copyrights pertaining to the original incorporated works. And so even though the work I'm using here, Monet's water lilies, one of his water lilies pieces, is out of copyright, the piece that I've created then has its own copyright associated with it because it's created an entirely new and substantially changed piece. Like, you wouldn't look at this piece immediately and know that I had used portions of that painting from Monet, and yet if you kind of then start to study the piece, you might just get those little references both in the colour schemes that I have brought in and through the fabrics, and obviously through the water lilies. I hope someone looking at it will see that. So that's just interesting to reflect on that. While you're watching me stitching away, and just I'm basically continuing up and down the leaf and just doing that wrapping with my needle. If you do have trouble with this technique and your needle is catching on the threads that you're wrapping, you can use the blunt, like the eye end of the needle rather than the pointy end. But usually I find it's fine, and I don't even mind if I catch a little bit of my top thread when I'm passing through. It doesn't really create any issues. Claude Monet, who has inspired this piece, was a French painter and founder of Impressionism painting, and was born in 1840 and died in 1926. And Many people will know the works created at Giverny, which is where this beautiful water lily garden was built. I'm just looking for the page that I had looked up on Giverny and the water lilies. Let me just have a look. I think it was from the Claude Monet Foundation at Giverny. I'm just waiting for the page to load. Because it had a lovely little bit of history around the gardens. So Monet was always fascinated by the light interplays and cloud reflections on water. And so he'd done many artworks painted on his floating studio in Argenteuil or on Dutch canals. And he loved the upside-down reflections in those liquid mirrors. And in 1893, he acquired land at the bottom of Clos Normand on the other side of the train tracks and diverted the Rue, a small branch of the river Epte. And so he created a pond, and that became the water garden that features in many, many museums, and including the beautiful paintings of his, not just at Giverny, but also in the various galleries. But I particularly enjoyed seeing them in the L'Orangerie in Paris. And so, Monet in his own garden had a Japanese bridge built, and that gave an oriental feel to the gardens, as well as the plants that he planted, which included bamboo, ginkgo, biloba, maple, Japanese tree peonies, lilies and weeping willows, which framed the pond. And he planted water lilies at the bottom of the pond. And he said, "I love water, but I also love flowers. That's why, once the pond was filled, I thought about adorning it with plants. I got a catalogue and simply chose at random." And Monet was so proud of his water garden that he loved to receive his guests there and spent hours contemplating it. One gardener looked after it full time, removing every dead leaf to keep it beautiful and pristine. And then in 1897, Monet started to paint the water lilies. As he sought to capture the atmosphere of this sky-like surface on which floated spots of colour, Monet created one of his greatest artworks and pushed his painting to the limits of abstract art, where the shimmering colours alone evoked a world of sensations and emotions. And as the article says, today you can admire water lilies at Musée de l'Orangerie in Paris and in many museums around the world. So I'm just continuing to stitch, I think, here around the outline in the piece and just anchoring that down. And so, it's really lovely to be sending this off to the Incognito Art Show. I'm making this video just after I've filmed this piece, and I won't be putting it up on my YouTube until the artworks have been open to the public and put up on the website, and I'll be awaiting the time that my piece is sold, because all pieces as part of the Incognito Art Show, they keep the artist secret until such time as someone buys the artwork, either at their public sale, where they can only ever display some of the pieces there. Otherwise they display them all online and people can purchase them online. So super exciting. One, to be taking part in it, two, to be supporting a good cause. And I've just really enjoyed, as I was mentioning earlier, exploring some, like, none of the techniques I'm using this in a totally new to me, but it's kind of like a bit of a combination of them, and certainly doing the amount of wrapping and the amount of surface work that I've done on this piece is new. But obviously doing a running stitch and then a whip stitch, that's not new, but working from the back initially to lay down the sort of foundation and then stitching on the surface, that is new. So isn't it interesting how you can sort of combine common techniques but in really exciting new ways, and even just the mixing of the medium of a printed painting with a canvas-like finish with fabrics, and then thinking about the forms that you want to doodle onto the surface and how you can use thread almost like when you draw and sort of draw over to get bolder lines, with each sort of repeating and drawing over the surface. At this point you can see I've got a little knot in the surface, always happens. And so I'm sitting out in the garden as I film it, which seems very fitting for a piece of artwork that's all focusing on the gardens. And just many happy memories of strolling around Giverny. I'd always get out there before the busloads of tourists arrived. You can get an early train out from, I think I've always done it out from Paris. And then rather than even waiting for the bus, I would hike from the train station up to Giverny, and get in there before all the tourist hordes arrived, and get some lovely quiet time to enjoy the reflections before all the noise and bustle is there. I haven't popped any photos in this video, but I definitely do have photos from Giverny as well. And I just love the serene colours of Monet's paintings. Interestingly, Monet actually had cataracts at the time that he was painting the water lilies series and paintings, so I think that also led to that quite sort of impressionistic abstract form of painting. Just having a look what else I've got to share with you while you continue watching me stitch. And so here it's talking about Impressionism, and crucial to the art of Impressionist paintings and painters was the understanding of the effects of light on the local colour of objects and the effects of the juxtapositions of colours with each other. And that's what I really loved exploring when I was selecting the fabrics. As you can see, that red, which almost has a bit of a shimmer in it, really felt like it was evoking some of those lower and upper bits of the painting, which had the red in them. And even with the piece of fabric that has those cross white stitches, not crosses, but those up and down white stitches across it, like a seam in it, I felt they really echoed the elements of the bridge, so those sort of architectural elements in the piece as well. The other thing I did when I was weaving the fabric was I didn't keep all of the painting up the same way, so I was actually turning the pieces of the cut up canvas, or the cut up transferred fabric, upside down, so that, and they were also then woven across every second row on the in the opposite direction, so sort of in the horizontal. So it didn't keep the painting in its entirety. It almost, I think in some ways, looks like each of the squares created with the weaving is almost like its own miniature canvas, which I love the idea as well, with this piece exploring the whole concept of what is art. So I love that you could almost have an individual canvas in each of the elements in the piece. And I also made sure that when I was working out the design on the back, that I wanted to make sure each of the squares had some stitching through it to, again, make sure it stayed cohesive in the process. I did use the method for weaving my fabric that I'd used in one of my other videos of anchoring down the pieces at each end of a base piece of fabric, because I find it so much easier to be working on a base piece and attaching my woven bits to that, rather than just having a whole lot of loose moving woven bits, because I wanted these to really hold together well, not to have sort of gaps in them, not to get too squiffy. Obviously I used a ruler when I was sort of drawing it out, but I didn't worry when I cut it if things weren't like totally even. And certainly when you introduce the fabric, if it's something like that sort of sari type Indian fabric, it's got a fair bit of movement in it, so you're not going to get perfectly sort of rectangular or straight edges or anything like that. So I didn't let that worry me at all. So still stitching and wrapping the piece. But let me know in the comments below if you're interested in seeing how I create these, because I definitely want to do some more of these, because this one's obviously flying off into the world and won't be mine anymore. I would definitely like to create another piece for myself that, whether it's a Monet or whether it's something else, I'll have an explore. I wouldn't mind doing some Van Gogh actually, and doing those lovely sort of swirls and circles in the sky of his pieces. So that could be a lovely one to sort of play with that imagery on the surface, but again combine a printed canvas style piece and weave it with other bits of fabric that bring out the colours. So yeah, there you can definitely see how that red piece of fabric down the bottom, which does have those sort of stitches through it, really picks up those colours. Like just above where I'm stitching, you can see those reds in the actual canvas or in the painting itself. So I hope you're having a lovely day as you're watching this, and hopefully you're getting some creative time yourself also. It's just so nurturing to have that creative time. As I'm filming this, it's actually just after Easter. We've had my lovely nephew Bailey staying with us, so I haven't had as much time to be doing, certainly haven't had time really to be doing videos. I did film this, I think, on the night that he'd arrived. He was quite tired, so he was just having a bit of a lay down, and that's why I didn't have the sound on and wasn't talking over the top of it at that point. But yeah, we've had lovely outings, really enjoyed the time together, and now he headed back to Western Australia this morning, so he's had a good holiday and we really enjoyed having him staying with us. But you'll be watching this video quite a while after that. As I say, I won't be putting this video up until the artwork has found its new home, or until such time as the art show has revealed who the artists of the pieces are. So I'll keep it a surprise. That's their one rule, that you don't pre-reveal your artwork and let anyone know who has created the works. I think there's some quite famous artists that actually put their works in. I think there has been like Ken Dunn's and Reg Mombassa's in the Incognito Art Show, and I did see on Instagram, I think someone else, there's at least one other artist that's working, I think, in painting, sketching, and then adding textile elements into it. So I'll be fascinated also just to see the other textile artists. So there you can see on the screen, I'm showing you the and now I'm just stitching it off at the back, but I have finished doing this. And so this back of the piece will ultimately be, and it has by this point, because I've sent it off, been stitched onto the card that you need to attach all the pieces to, and that's what you put your details onto the back of the card. So there's the card that it's going to be attached to, and you can see there. And so what I'm doing here is just clipping it onto the card so that I can put some stitching in. In the end, I just did it down either side with a nice sharp needle, and just using a strong regular sewing cotton. I think I was using an Orifil cotton, one of the ones that I'd used on the surface, which really just blends into the piece as well. And what I'm going to do here is do some long stitches on the back, and then just some short little pop-up stitches on the front. Just going to have a sip of my drink. So just threading the needle, putting a knot in, and what I'm going to do is secrete the knot in the piece so that it's not sitting on the back card side. But yeah, the Incognito Art Show is very well organised. They send you your cards and a little sticker and all the information, and they even send you a prepaid envelope for returning it in, because I think they recognise that artists are donating their time and their creativity to it as well. And for artists where that is their one source of income, obviously when you're donating an artwork, it is quite a significant thing for you to do. And so I believe all the artworks sell for $100, and so yeah, hopefully lots is raised for the charity and is able to support artists with disabilities. And so you can see I'm just stitching through, and I'm always because I want to keep it relatively neat, because obviously the back with the cardboard will be seen by the person that purchases it. So I don't want that to be an eyesore. I don't mind if it's a little bit sort of not higgledy-piggledy, just a little bit hand done, because that is the effect that I wanted. If I really wanted it to be all perfect, I could obviously use a sewing machine. I don't actually have a sewing machine, so that solved that dilemma. But I like the hand stitched touch to it. So I won't do too much of the stitching on camera, I don't think. I'm pretty sure I stopped the camera at some point soon. And then at the end of this video, you'll be seeing some of the close-ups of the finished piece, because I know you probably want to see what it actually looks like in closer up. So these were some photos that I then took after the piece was done. But just finishing off the stitching down the side. And as I say, I just did it down both of the long sides of the piece. I actually left it so it's open, and so you can just slightly see the back of the piece, because I know some people, me included, like to see the backs of the stitched pieces. And obviously, ultimately, the person that purchases it might want to take it off its card and mount it in a different way. I think the Incognito Art Show, they sell frames with the pieces, so that people can have a ready-made frame of the size of the piece. So as you can see there, I'm just relining up to stop myself getting too squiffy. And just lining up each time from the back to sort of get it through to a good point. So just showing you the stitches there, showing you the front. Giving you a bit of a look at it. And then, as I say, I've put some photos at the end as well with the piece, which you can now see those photos, so that's that one that I was stitching. And again, it's thinking about what's going to be sort of sitting forward and what's in the more background, even when you are stitching something like the water lilies, and just getting the sort of thickness, the number of wraps consistent with that. But I just love how with this wrapping style over a foundation stitch, it just really has the thread sitting on the surface. It is quite dimensional, and the stitches kind of have a real, I think, a sort of a strength to them, but they do still have that sense of doodling, of being hand drawn. So I think it really does give that that sketchy effect. And there you can see the canvas and the colours. There's one of the bits of fabric, which is almost like a bit of a path. And again, those architectural elements, which you can see the bit of the fabric with the red there, as well as then the architectural elements of the bridge in the actual canvas. So again, there's some of that red with the stitches through it, and some of that water lily fabric with the little yellowy water lilies. So that is my piece, and thank you so much for watching. Bye everyone.